Welcome to Wilder. Today, I'm honored to be joined here by Stefan Christmann, who has some of the most incredible photography of emperor penguins in Antarctica I have ever seen, and has published a book on emperor penguins and even worked with BBC and recently Netflix on a documentary on them. Stefan, it's an honor getting to have you on here today. You've spent years photographing emperor penguins. If you were to teach a class on what their lifestyle kind of looks like and how they survive such incredibly harsh conditions, what would you share?
Yeah, so I've had a lot of time to study them, obviously. Total of, I think, 27 months now I've spent with them. And I think, if I were to teach a class of kids and teach them about how they live down there, I would say it's all about snuggling up and just working as a team. And I think that is what really makes them special and what makes them so successful.
Yeah. What does the seasonal life kind of look like if you were to walk through kind of spring, summer, winter, fall, all of that in an emperor penguin life?
Yeah, so since we have the emperors on the southern hemisphere of the planet, everything is upside down, you could say, and also the seasons are upside down in a way. So everything starts during our winter time, which is their summertime, or let's say even a little bit later when their summertime turns into fall time, if you could actually call that, and the sea ice begins to freeze. So that is the time when slowly but steadily the ocean water that is in the bays will start to solidify and it will create a sheet of ice, and that will be, let's say, the first season for the emperors to hop onto that ice and walk back into the bay to a place where they themselves once hatched. So this is one of the very special things about them. They always come back to their birthplace. And then it's all about finding a mate. Once they have found a mate, it's all about laying an egg and taking care of that egg. Raising their chicks afterwards. That is in the midst of winter, so they're the only species that breeds in the midst of the Antarctic winter. And later on, as the chicks grow up, it's all about feeding them, and they get very, very hungry, and then sending them off to live their own lives. And 5 years later, the chicks will do the exact same thing. They will come back to the bay and they will start their own family, and they will begin their own life cycles as well. So it's a wonderful circle that keeps on happening every year.
You said you've been photographing them cumulatively 27 months,
Indeed,
but
yeah.
About how many, not cumulatively, but how many years have you been kind of working with emperor penguins and photographing them and following them?
Okay, yeah, it all started in 2012. That was my first travel to Antarctica as a scientist in geophysics. And I wintered there on a German research station called Neumayer 3 Station. And 5 years later, actually, I went back for the BBC to film there and to make a film about the emperors. And then again, 5 years later, I went back there again for a short stint of 6 weeks and filmed for a Netflix film that is going to come out this year, or it's actually scheduled to come out this year, called Our Oceans. And maybe to many people, it's not immediately clear that emperor penguins are ocean animals, are water animals, but they have a very, very strong connection to the ocean, and that is why they are also part of this program. So in a total then, I would say of around about 10 years now, a little bit more maybe. And who knows, if that 5-year cycle for myself goes on, maybe in, what would it be then, 2027, I would be back there, who knows?
Yeah. Yeah, man, that must have been some incredible experiences you got to have on both of those trips. So very cool.
I think it's very special and a big privilege to be able to spend an entire year with them, right? So typically when you go to Antarctica as a tourist, you only spend the summer month down there, and you only get to see a fraction of the magic that is actually happening there. And if you go down there for a winter and you stay the entire year, then all of a sudden you can see all these things that only a couple of people have ever seen in their entire lives, yet photographed or filmed. So I consider myself very, very lucky having had that opportunity.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's just such a difference between when you kind of get to see something and witness it for a brief moment in kind of that touristy feel where maybe you get to spend a couple hours with it a day or a week versus the difference of kind of staying with an animal species for months or years, right, on end, and kind of getting to watch that family grow and progress and getting to watch the seasons change and see how it navigates all of that. So I'm sure that's just amazing to get to experience with penguins.
And really learning that they are characters, really, right? So they have their very own, quirks, and so it's really, really nice if you spend every day with them, because then slowly but steadily you can uncover all of these little things.
Yeah, totally. I love that. What's the toughest scene you've ever had to witness from all of your experiences in Antarctica?
I think there are so many tough moments when you're spending such a long time there. Mostly they are related to the very harsh weather conditions, obviously. It's really no fun living there, I would imagine, so if I had to live there every day. But I think one of the toughest things I have seen was in 2017 during our film stint for the BBC. And we were filming a group of emperors that had fallen into a gully. And these gullies, they form between the sea ice and the edge of the ice shelf, depending on the weather conditions and on the wind conditions. When snow is blown against the ice walls, but it doesn't fully form a ramp, it just starts to form a hole. And a lot of these birds had fallen into that hole. And I think I think there was always, there was also a video that went viral when we dug a ramp in order to get them out. But this was only possible for one of the gullies. And there was a second gully, and there was a little tiny chick in that gully, and it was always climbing up the slope, trying to get out, just to fall over and tumble down again. And that gully was so steep and so dangerous that it was not possible for us to go in there and to dig a ramp. And up to this day, I would say this is one of the scenes that still haunts me, because we had to leave that place because the weather was getting worse and we simply couldn't save that little guy. So, but that's unfortunately part of the reality of the harsh life that they have to live, and part of the dangers that they have to face.
Yeah, that's tragic. So would they have gotten stuck in that gully because that was the gully that they had to get across, or did they accidentally kind of slide into it, or how did they get in that gully in the first place?
Yeah, so mostly they will be pushed in there by the wind. So especially during very strong storms, the wind will simply push them in. But there are also situations in which they would try to climb these ice ramps that form over the year in order to get onto the more stable ice shelf, especially later in the season when the sea ice is about to break up and they're still waiting to finish their molt. Some of the time it is necessary for them to climb onto the ice shelf and buy time in order to finish their molt. And if they do that in bad weather conditions, then obviously there's also a big chance that they can fall into these gullies. And if they fall in there, the adults, some of the time they can still climb out, but the chicks are simply too small.
Yeah.
So for them, it's typically a death trap.
Yeah, I think one of the most inspiring parts of emperor penguins, at least to me, is their extremely deep commitment and kind of bond to one another during nesting season. Can you share a little bit about what their courtship process is like, and what their raising a chick process is like, and how they get through really one of the toughest imaginable situations as a team?
So typically I would spend about 1.5 hours on that topic,
Yeah.
But I will try to keep it a little shorter here. So one of the things that many people think is that emperors are have only one partner per life, or so there are monogamists or strict monogamists, but that is actually not the case. So they are so-called serial monogamists, which means that they will have one mate per season. But at least for this mate, they do everything they can in order to create that very deep connection, that very deep bond. And one of the very nice things about their courtshipping is that it's not simply about wooing the partner, but actually to getting to know each other very well. And that goes to the extent that they will try to mimic their calls, they will try to mimic their movements, and they will do this until they are fully in sync. And that can take them a couple of days, couple of weeks even. And every day, many, many hours, they will spend imitating their calls, imitating their movements. So to some extent, I always say they are creating their own family melody or family song, you could call it, and even their own choreography or some kind of dance. I think that's also why people refer to it as the penguin dance. And this actually enables them later on, when the females go to the ocean in order to feed and the males take care of the egg, once the females come back, to find each other again amongst thousands of other birds, because they have this unique melodic key and that unique movement that they can do. And they will do this at various positions in the colony. And at some point in time, their mate will answer, and then they will do that again. And until they have found each other, they will sing their melody and do their dance. And that's kind of one of the very special and magical things about them. And then raising their chicks is really about keeping them on their feet as long as possible. But they will grow very fast if they're fed. And at some point in time, they will have to stand on their own legs. And then it's really about feeding. So these guys, they are hungry and they're hungry 24/7. And then the parents take turns. So one of the parents will always go to the ocean and get more food while the other is waiting with the chick. And at some point in time, even both of the parents have to go to the ocean at the same time in order to get enough food. And during that time, the chicks are supervised by other adults in the colony, so-called kindergarten teachers or supervisors. And how they're chosen, nobody knows, but they're still chosen in some way. Yeah, and then it's about the chicks, exploring the colony all by themselves, growing up, undergoing their molt, and then fledging in the end.
So how do you kind of find yourself inspired, and what do you learn from witnessing emperor penguins in this kind of annual trial that they go through?
Yeah, I would say the main thing that got me hooked on emperors is obviously they almost look like humans, right? So they are standing upright, they walk on 2 feet, they have these human qualities, I want to say. So it's very easy to like them in the beginning. And maybe at first you feel like they are funny to look at. Maybe they look a little clumsy. But the more you learn about them and the more you observe them, the more you see how special they are. And I think the one thing that really struck me as I spent a lot of time with them is their social nature. So the social nature of their living together, and the strong bonds that you were talking about. And I think the one very inspiring thing about them is that even though you might think they can't fly, they're birds that can't fly and they can't really walk all that well, but still they manage to live in a surrounding that is so hostile. And where we as humans, we can only spend a couple of hours down there, and even we can only do it with a lot of technology, a lot of heavy clothing and stuff like that, and they have to live out there day after day after day. And not only do they manage to live there, but they actually thrive there. And they can only manage to do that because they work as a team, they work as a super organism, and that I find super inspiring.
Yeah, it's almost like ants, how on their own ants seem really powerless and kind of lost and helpless, even though they are incredibly strong creatures. But then when they get together, they become almost kind of this super organism, like you described it, where they can just do incredible things. And penguins really seem to be the same way, where on their own they might look a lot more helpless, but as a team they really thrive and are amazing creatures.
And isn't that one of the coolest things if you imagine human beings doing the same? I mean, we have all these issues around the globe, things that one single person can never ever solve. But if we all work together, then maybe we would also stand a chance of tackling these issues and actually making this world a better place for us and also for every other being that we share this world with.
Yeah, totally. So what is it that you think the biggest threat is that emperor penguins face? And do you think that there's hope in that? What does that look like?
Yeah, so the biggest threat that the emperors are facing is a loss of habitat. That is, I would say, loss of sea ice in particular. And that is a consequence of global warming, of the climate crisis that we're all facing. So it is a man-made thing. And the way that this is affecting them is that the sea ice that we just spoke about a couple of minutes ago, which is crucial for their breeding cycle, that forms later in the year and breaks open earlier in the year as well. So it's actually shortening the time span in which they can breed twice. And the reason for this is the ever-warming ocean currents, so warm water masses that are slowly but steadily not only melting the Antarctic glacier, so the ice shelf. And I think we have all heard about icebergs, the size of small cities calving from the continent. But this is also true for the sea ice. The sea ice breaks open early, and one of the adaptation strategies that we have seen with the emperors is that they will climb these snow ramps onto the more stable ice shelf in order to buy time. But the caveat with this is once they're on top of that ice shelf and the sea ice has broken open, these ramps are drifting away as well. So if chicks are still dependent on their parents can simply not reach them anymore. So they can also not feed their chicks anymore. So it is, it might seem like a solution at first, but it's only buying them so much time, and it's still not sure if they're going to make it. And I think studies show that by the year 2100, we could lose around 60 to 80% of all of the emperors around Antarctica.
Wow.
Which is, which is a very, very sad number.
Yeah, that is incredibly sad. I know you do a lot of speaking engagements and speak a lot to how emperor penguins are affected and just their lives and everything. What is kind of maybe some of your hopes in your speaking engagements that you do? And can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so first and foremost, whenever I do a public speech or one of these engagements, I try to convey the magic of the place and try to show people a world that maybe they did not know existed like this. So a lot of times when people think about Antarctica, they think about a white ice desert, nothing else there. And I think I managed to show them that this world is stunning. It's full of color, it's full of life. Yes, it is a desert, but that's only a definition in the end. But there is so many things that you can explore and see, and so much magic there. And once I, touch them on an emotional level, then it's a lot easier for me to also tell people about how threatened this place is. And you know how it goes. Whenever people feel a connection to something, then all of a sudden they're also willing to change something about themselves in order to protect that place. And that is typically one of the strategies that I employ in order to, get the message across that this place is threatened and that we must all act in order to keep whatever we can keep. So I think at this point in time, everybody is aware of the fact that there's no stopping of global warming. We can only limit the extent of it. And I think we can all help. We can all do something. We can do all our part in order to limit it as much as possible. But you were mentioning the aspect of hope earlier, and I really do want to say that I still believe there is hope, because if there wasn't hope, I wouldn't be giving all these speeches, right? So I still believe that people can change, and I think that people should not be afraid. I think people should be inspired, and that is what I try to give to them, because whenever people are inspired, they really show their best. They really show what they can be. So I always ask the question, would you rather, talk to a person who is afraid, or would you like to talk to a person who is inspired?
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, I think that there can be a lot of maybe shaming or kind of guilt tripping involved sometimes. But I would agree that it is so much more powerful when someone is inspired to make a change and truly believes it with their whole heart. In the long term, I believe that's going to make such a bigger impact than just kind of like a short term or temporary or forced change through fear.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think a person who is inspired and really speaks from the heart can always be a condensation nuclei for, changing other people as well, and they can do the same thing. And all of a sudden, it is really apparent that even one single person can have an impact. So that is also a very inspiring message to me personally. So I have had people after my presentations, like days or weeks after, I have had people reach out to me, and they were saying again how they loved the presentation and the images, and they have made changes in their lives. So they have stopped eating meat, or that they have stopped eating meat, or they have repaired their bike and they're now using it more often again and stuff like that. So that's something that that pays back, and that makes it really worthwhile to be standing in front of an audience.
I love what you mentioned earlier about a lot of times people's perception of Antarctica can be that it's just this white desert with nothing really on it, kind of lifeless. But yet, when you look in the details, there's so much, to be learned there. And it's clear when I look at a lot of your photos, like I know you've talked about like the colors in Antarctica, for example, that you get are just incredible when it comes to photography and all of that. I want to run through maybe two of my favorite photos of yours here and ask you a little bit about your creative process with them and what you're looking to capture. First, I'd love to take a look at this incredible image here where I feel like a lot of times it's rare to find myself as captivated by the action of a photo as I feel in a video. Because I feel like, you get action shots in photos sometimes and they look cool, but it's hard to kind of immerse yourself in the story maybe of that moment. But your image of the emperor penguin hunched over its dead chick that you posted up relatively recently, as you said, was very inspiring and heartbreaking to someone like me. Can you tell me a little bit more about this photo and how that moment and capturing that moment has kind of affected you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's one of the key moments, I would say, during my time there. A moment wherever I think about it, I actually am getting goosebumps now. It was, one of those days, and we had many of these days, unfortunately, when there had been a raging storm for a couple of days, and you know exactly once you return to the sea ice, you are going to see all of the damage that has been done by such a storm. And typically you would go back onto the sea ice and you would see these little lumps of snow lying around, and you would know immediately it's either a lost egg or a chick that didn't make it in the end. And in this particular photo it was even sadder, because we actually saw the chick that didn't make it. It was simply lying there next to the colony, and we were filming it as part of, telling the story, what happens after a storm. And all of a sudden, this adult father who didn't have a chick on his feet anymore was coming out of the colony and approaching that chick. And he was taking turn and turn around that chick and, trying to get some life out of it by pushing it with his beak all the time, but not in a rough way, but very, very gentle. And at some point in time, he even managed to put the chick onto his feet, and then, as they would do with their live chick, he gently put his brood pouch across the dead body. And to me, that was one of the moments where, at least I feel like I understood that there is so much more happening there than instinct. So instinct in a biological sense. So I have to disclaim that I am not a biologist, but I am a scientist. And typically you would look for a logical reason why an animal is doing that, also in biology. And typically it's all about the survival of the species or of the individual. And you have to keep in mind that the fathers at this point in time, they haven't eaten for 5 months, and they're starving. And the logical thing, to me at least, would be if a father has lost the chick he would probably immediately make his way towards the ocean and try to feed as soon as possible because his life depends on it. But instead, this father decided to take that dead little chick onto his feet and try to warm it and try to bring life back into it. So how do you explain that with logic? At least I couldn't. And to me, it was, I even want to say it was proof that these animals have feelings, that there is emotion, that they have hope, that they want, to succeed, because they give a promise to the female that they will take care of the egg and of the chick once it hatches until the females come back. And at this point in time, the females hadn't come back. So this father was probably, it was a desperate attempt to keep this promise and to be successful, but obviously that chick didn't come back to life, and it was all in vain. So that was really heartbreaking, but also really eye-opening in a way.
Yeah, well said. Yeah, it makes you definitely think about the deeper things that could be going on than just a simple, set of DNA that's driving it to do some action. Yeah, exactly. Or the way it's made up. So that's really cool. Yeah, that image was just phenomenal and really struck me when I saw it. And it's rare that I feel like I get an image that touches me that deeply. So that was an amazing moment you were able to capture. A second image that I really like for a much different reasons is this one here, where it's just an incredibly simple image of an Adelie penguin. And it's kind of walking up to just a crack in the sea ice. And the way that the whole composition is, with just the simple curve in the crack and just a very plain scene otherwise, and how you compose that penguin itself was just remarkable to me, I guess. And so can you speak a little bit about how you got that shot, but also maybe a little bit more to how the minimalist blank canvas of Antarctica kind of plays into your photographic style as a whole?
So this photo was taken during a time at which the sea ice was not stable anymore. So instead of, being on eye level with the Adelie, we actually were much higher, probably 5 to 10 meters higher on the stable ice shelf. And so we were looking down, which is, most of the time it's not really the ideal angle for taking photos. But in this case, it actually turned the entire ground of the sea ice into, a white piece of paper, or a canvas, as you put it. And once you have that in front of you, then pretty much everything that runs into your viewfinder all of a sudden pops, because there is a lot of color, as many people maybe do not notice. And then having that crack with the deep blue in there, I think just made a really nice composition that is even telling a little bit of a story, because this guy was actually approaching the crack and then, thinking, how do I get across? And I have to say that Adelies are funny. So they are one of the few species that go there in summertime. So there will always be a group of, I guess, around 50 to 80 Adelies in Atka Bay. And they're real troublemakers. So they will stir up the colony, they will try to steal food, whatever they can. So they're fun to watch, really. And this guy, I think he was also yelling in that photo. So again, there's a very human element to them. And what I really like about having that space is that I can really control, even without having any guiding lines, I can control where the viewer is going to look, and where the eyes are going to wander. And one of the cool things about having space is that as the eye is scanning the image for something to get a grip, you get that sense of a wide open nothingness, and the sense of the loneliness there. And then once you have focused on the colors, then all of a sudden you are absolutely hooked onto it. And then I think that is what I employ in a lot of my images when I try to tell the story of the habitat, of the wide open nothingness, the desert, and all of a sudden you find that little spot, and it's life, and it's colorful, and it lights up your heart. And that's, I think, where I can get people on an emotional level.
Yeah, that's so cool. Yeah, Adelie penguins to me always just look like the rowdy group of teenagers. The way they look,
They
the way
are.
they act, like it's so funny to watch, and I'm sure that that must be just all the more incredible in person. So, yeah, you mentioned your experiences filming with BBC or Netflix in the past, and really excited to see the upcoming Netflix one that you were a part of. What what is it like filming for a documentary for BBC or Netflix, and what's maybe some of your favorite parts about that?
There are so many favorite parts. I think the best part is that you spend every day outside and you get to see so many things. Because when I was there as a scientist at first, it was not my job to be out with the penguins. I was actually doing research. And then whenever I had time and I could spare some time, then we went out and saw the penguins. When I was filming for the BBC and also for Netflix, then all of a sudden this is your job, and it is great. I mean, you're getting paid to be out there, so there's really nothing better, to be honest. And then all of a sudden you can really dive into that realm, into that world of the penguins, see how they work, what they do, what they have to endure. And yeah, if you're simply willing to face the conditions, freezing, your food freezes, your drinks freeze. When you need a bio break, you have to wait because that's simply not possible. And there are a few things I would say that they are not so nice, but you will always get rewarded with the greatest sightings that you could imagine. And but aside from this, there is obviously a lot of pressure to get the shot right. And if you're typically, if you're in such a remote location, you do not have a large film crew because it's simply too expensive. So the burden is shouldered maybe on 2 or 3 people at most. And you need to get so many angles and so many shot sizes and all these things. So there is a lot of rushing around, a lot of changing lenses, trying to get the shot pressure next day. You come back at night, you have a look at the rushes and you see, okay, we didn't get it, or for some reason the penguin wasn't standing in the best way, so you have to try again. And you have to go out there in every weather condition. So whenever I give one of my presentations, I have a photo of myself at the end of the 11-month filming stint, and I have dark eyes, I look really bad, really unhealthy.
Yeah.
And I had only very little sleep during that time, but I still wouldn't want to miss a second of it.
Yeah. Yeah, it shows that picture of you, I'm sure, shows all the more how impressive it is that those penguins survive those conditions when you're, bundled up in your layers of clothes and, have technology to assist you and you're still looking like a zombie.
Half of my face is frozen, exactly. I mean, most of the time you can't even open your eyes because your eyelashes freeze together.
Wow.
So.
Yeah. Yeah, that's incredible. So, as I ask to everyone that I interview, what is the single most important thing to remember when you're doing wildlife photography?
So at least to me, I would say the most important thing to remember when you do wildlife photography is to give it a purpose, to have that idea or that message that you want to share, that you want to get across to your viewer. Because I believe once you have that, and once you're working from your heart, then all of a sudden you will excel in it for sure. So, I mean, especially in a world where you are flooded with images, right? So when you open Instagram, I mean, you can, doom scroll for days, but only a few images will capture your attention. And I think those are the images most of the time that come from photographers that are working with a purpose. And that to me is one of the most important things that I try to find in every one of my shoots, really. And that's why I limit myself to only a very small selection of topics that I actually photograph. And most of my time I am actually working on the penguins because they have really given my life so much purpose, or such a deeper meaning, that all of a sudden I have found a passion that I want to share, and I really hope that this also then reflects in my images. And so I would ask everybody who's going out there, find the things that really tickle you and just pursue it, and find all the angles that you can find and share it with the world. Because if you share something that you really love and that you are really really working hard for, then this will show in your images, and then you will also capture your audience for sure.
I love that. Very well said. Yeah, it's evident how laser focused on those specific passions you have been, and it shows in your work. And so I'm glad I've gotten to talk to you today, and thank you so much for sharing all your experiences, and excited to see what you continue to come up with next.
Thanks for having me. It was a pleasure.
Thank you all for watching. If you'd like to see more from Stefan, make sure to head over to his website in the description below. I also just finished wrapping up my first ever wildlife photography creators cohort, on where I teach you guys how to become a full-time wildlife photography creator. And the second cohort is launching right now. If you guys want to check that out, you can head to the link in the description below where you can apply to be a part of the cohort. I'll see you guys in the next episode.